I met him during one of the TEP evaluation meeting that I was attending as BIG partner representative in Bangalore. And honestly speaking, like since the moment I met him, I became his fan. He came with his drone to attend and evaluate the applicants, and I like
Hmm.
I find him super cool as a mentor, as an evaluator. So, all those who did not get time to check his LinkedIn profile, Dr. Simha holds a doctorate in physics from University of Calicut, and he is the CEO of Audicor Cardiometrics. He is also the chair, one of the chair for the task force that has been created by FICCI on healthcare technologies, wherein he is primarily involved in designing the business strategies and mentoring all the startups. He also sits on the advisory committee of the Lemelson Foundation, which is based out of the US. His expertise, honestly speaking, I think he's good with everything, but on paper, his expertise lies into aerospace, biotechnology, robotics, plant automation, and of course, the medical device innovation. I welcome you, Dr. Sima, and thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for interacting with the audience today. Uh, for all those who don't know about the Biotechnology Ignition Grant program, you can check out our YouTube channel, Incubator IITK. We have posted our previous webinars there, and wherein I've covered all the basics about BIG. And since for this particular webinar, I wanted more of a Q&A session wherein Dr. Sima would walk you through his perspective as an evaluator, and then we would bombard him with all the questions that we have stored in our Q&A box. So over to you, Dr. Sima.
Thank you. Yeah. So, yeah, whatever Aditi has mentioned is kind of true about me being very happy to bond with you guys, especially the budding young STEM entrepreneurs based out of India. And one of the major focuses now is to build the ecosystem of entrepreneurship in the country. And so, therefore, um, you know, and the reason stems from the fact that I've been a startup since I came out of school in 1980, um, and the word startup was not really used at that time. We were all uh, denizens that lived in garages and came out once in a while to do tests and demonstrate the product. So um, my journey has been quite considerably similar to what you guys, harbor in your hearts at the moment. Is what can I do to develop something that's really, really nice and impactful, and then probably one day, a lot of people will find joy in using it. So very quickly, just to give you an idea of the program, the big program is an ignition program. We'd like to work with young folks uh, and also old folks like me. Also, I've also been an applicant to the ignition program with many of my ideas, and uh, and then take this idea from what it is as a very nebulous concept to something that is more tangible and solid and I would say useful in terms of value uh, in a period of it's a translational research program. So we give about 18 months for folks to be able to develop a prototype and a proof of concept. So big is a very multidisciplinary, agnostic to any areas that are uh, very specific, but can cover agriculture, can cover biotechnology, it can cover medtech devices, um, and a fairly widespread life sciences based program. So happy to have you guys who are interested and keen in applying. And all those who have applied to understand the intent and objective of the big program is to not only be able to nurture your great ideas into prototypes, but also nurture them into making them useful for society in some way or the other as an impact. So let's get down to quickly going through what we think this whole program is. Can I share the screen, Aditi, from here?
Yes, you can do that, sir.
I can do that.
Meanwhile, everyone, I would request everyone to post their queries in the Q&A box, and we would be taking all the queries while Dr. Sima runs us through his presentation.
Yeah. So I have the Q&A box open, so you can keep posting the Q&A whenever it is. Maybe uh, I would pause to answer if there is anything specific that needs to be contextually driven. Otherwise, we could have freewheeling discussions and maybe your criticisms on the way we panelists, I mean, we reviewers actually review the program. So, as I said, this is a point of view. Uh, it's a reviewer, and most of the time, apart from reviewing the project, we also go to the extent of mentoring the company through its project phase to be able to to see how they can actually um, you know uh, be successful. So there are many times when many of the ideas get stuck, and Biotech Ignition Grant and the BIRAC folks put together a team of folks who will not only review your project but also try to find out solutions where you are stuck and see that it doesn't fall completely through because it hasn't the support. All right. So the generic process is that basically you start with screening of the applications and the proposals that come in. We look at, um, the basic qualifying criteria, status of the team, stage of business. Are you a startup? How old are you? Are you qualified to be able to, sort of look at these kind of programs? And then of course the concept and relevance of the particular project into the focus area of um, the big scheme. Once that is done, this is done internally. Once you send your application, and then there is a shortlisting of the projects that look suitably qualified, and it's run through by a bunch of experts, so-called experts, um, who will probably look at your proposal from the point of view of its science, inventiveness, its commercialization potential, integrity of the proposal, and the team's capability. Now, there are points given for this, and the reviewers are spread across the country. They receive a copy of your proposal and they go through it. And of course, um, we are sworn to secrecy in the sense that we sign a non-disclosure agreement to be able to look at your proposal and treat it with utmost confidentiality. But at the same time, of course, we look at your proposal and also look at these various aspects, which I will go through while during this discussion. The next stage is that you are asked to in person pitch to the peer reviewers who are basically leaders from the industry who have experience in working in the projects themselves, or maybe in mentoring some of the projects and observing some of the ideas go from concept to a prototype. So multiple angles are looked at, and then of course there is a score that is given, which finally again shortlists them down to a bunch of teams who and projects who, based on their intent, will be selected for the grant, right? And you will receive the money after they have gone through to see that this is a genuine party and has genuine intentions and has the passion that we have seen in the proposal. So the ultimate aim, we want you to build a sustainable and a robust business. So the criteria for evaluation and buy ranking, of course, is must be known to you also. But I just thought I'll cover this, that the scores will be given are given in the brackets, and they would refer to what is the kind of unmet need, or is there a pressing pain factor that you are addressing to be able to in your concept. And this is given about 20 points, and from 0 to 20 would be the pain score factor, right? I hope you are familiar with the pain score factor, the pain score. The second part of it is the value proposition and differentiation of your idea in the final product. So we are looking at, say, um, a product that may have a completely new spin to a particular set of concepts, or what we call as uh, a new idea that is put together to be able to reposition an existing uh, concept or a scientific concept with a new value. Um, that is at stage one. We also have folks who have come up with totally disruptive ideas, which ultimately lead to a product. Now, normally these are very strongly science-based products, science-based concepts, who in turn, of course, have used that science to be able to make a product that can be used very effectively and will perform better, faster, cheaper, and better. So that's another 20 points. The technical viability of the product, from the viability of transforming the concept to a prototype, involves what kind of science, involves what kind of infrastructure, involves what kind of knowledgeable people that are required for this, or knowledgeable teams as they would come together to be able to execute this, is probably the most important uh, sort of aspect that BIRAC looks at from the point of view of the number of projects that can actually get translated. So this has got the highest number of points. And when we look at a team, we obviously look at their strength and ability to be able to execute the project. Otherwise, we have a lot of dud projects that don't get executed because people give up at the end of it, right? The team strength and passion is, of course, an important part of it. And what I would try to, emphasize here is, when we look at team strength, we look at the combined team, not an individual person executing the project. So that's also an important aspect. Well, of course, business perspective, good to have, because ultimately your objective is to build a business. And it's also important to have that entrepreneurial uh, bug in the team, because that is a great motivating factor for people to be able to finish the project. That's what is something that spark that needs to be um, you know uh, catalyzed with a business perspective, right? So, okay, ethical approval, how it is obtained, entrepreneur who has got this into uh, okay. I can answer those questions. I'll come to that. Uh, right, unmet need. Um, I'm sure all of you have been through this a number of times, but an unmet need is a very deep insight, or at least we expect a deep insight into the need, because lots of needs are there, and their pain levels can be at many levels. The markets, the sizes could be at many levels. So if you multiply the number of people who suffer from that pain score would be fairly high in this evaluation. So what we would really need to understand is how painful it is and how big it is. And this can be described by the fact that it's either an economic pain, or it has a high degree of morbidity or mortality, if you know what I'm trying to get at. So when we talk about the size of the market, we are talking about the population that is afflicted by this particular need and what is its morbid and mortality status. Um, there are also clinically acceptable solutions, uh, but there are also clinically acceptable solutions uh, with with tremendous side effects or with undesirable side effects, which of course is a lack of a reasonably decent outcome. Um, there is no technology or science known so far. There is a term in clinical sciences called idiopathic, which means that we don't know why. So there are a lot of allergies which say, "Oops, we don't know why." Um what is the the etiology of it? So we call it idiopathic, and then sort of guess on what is the treatment process that would probably work, would not probably work. Um, so, given all this search and patient interviews that you have done, at least tells us the amount of work that you have put in to be able to understand, number one, the problem, which is the domain, and number two, of how many people it afflicts and at what is the nature of the affliction it has. Um, expect to look at, if you have interviewed your patients, then how many of them have you interviewed, what kind of patients, and why do you feel that this problem is a big problem. That gives, an idea of your depth of understanding in this particular area. And then, of course, you can use data from public domain, which may be reliable in terms of being able to find out what is the kind of I mean, the prevalence and distribution of such kind of problems. Um, Now you've got a list of reasons which cause the pain, and in your patient interviews, maybe you can even, uh, you know, itemize them in the order of severity or popularity, as you would probably get back, saying that, it's very common for a person who has had CABG to have atrial fibrillation post CABG. And when you say it's common, like what do you mean by common? We try to score. We say, well, it's looks like 40 to 60% of the patients who have had CABG are at high risk of atrial fibrillation. So this is something that leads us to a fact that there is a factor called a cost versus benefit, because you may be having competing technologies around there. And most of these technologies come with a cost over benefit. They don't really say that we'll give you a 100% cure, but the benefits outweigh uh, the risks that are there. So therefore, it's a risk mitigation strategy, and you say risk over benefit score, right? And I'm sure most of you will be using this risk versus benefit score on your 14971. If you're medical device developers, you will be doing an ISO 14971 risk management, where you will look at your risks, mitigate the risks, and whatever may be your residual risks, you would probably be doing a risk benefit score, ultimately saying that the benefits of this particular technology outweigh the risks in the current moment. So that residual risk can be justified. Um, Now you're asking me what is 14971? I will tell you that's an exercise that you need to conduct at a very early stage of your concept. If your concept is going to result in the end of the world, guys, I think you need to re-examine your concept. But the fact is that you will uh, be doing this risk management exercise at an early stage so that your concept becomes robust and risk-free. Um, Happy to answer any questions on that part of it also, on how do you go about doing it. But it's an exercise that is absolutely necessary, right? Okay, so the next point that is here is value proposition and differentiation. Now, what do we look in here is basically how do you describe the concept idea of the proposal in one para, and how does it look like that when the reviewer reads it, he says, yes, this is going to change the world, right? So when you say that it's going to change the world, your whole is, yeah, am I still clear? I think it says internet connection not stable here.
You're fine,
Yeah,
Dr.
fine,
Simha.
okay.
Yeah.
So it really depends on how you're able to concise the whole thing in one para, and it will be a lesson for you to be able to communicate your idea in one simple paragraph, maybe even in one simple sentence, right? But the most important things is that you have made certain points of the important areas of pain points, and you'd like to look at it on how the competition looks at it in terms of whether your product is diagnostic or therapeutic, and how you actually uh, score over your competition in terms of your concept, in terms of the value propositions that you have offered. Most of you have sat through and said that like my product will improve on this product's delivery. But I would strongly recommend that you make your search more global. Global in the sense, uh, look at, you have access to international patents, you have access to international products sold in the market, and you have access to friends and um, colleagues working elsewhere in the world, and it's always good to sort of have a dialogue with them and do your comparisons. um, there are a lot of patent searches and publication searches that one does in this process. I would say that it's a good idea to be able to look around and then keep an eye, because a company does not reveal its technology or its IP till the time a patent is filed. And the moment the patent is filed, the reports of the technology and its benefits and what are the findings generally find their way into a publication. So do not assume, of course, that publications are free open source technologies. Not all of them are, but many of them have already been protected by a patent. So you can see where your competition is and at what stage of development they are in. And if you can summarize in one paragraph of what is going on, what is going to be the estimated health economic impact, uh, it'll be great for us to be able to understand your impact in general. Now, the health economic impact, there are many ways by which one can do that, but we are open to the fact that you can define your own metrics if it is, or define it on a metrics that uh, the industry is quite familiar with, like a gross costing top-down approach, where you take the costs of the treatment and the consumables and the lifetime costs and put it together and then say that, okay, this works out to be much better than what is existing today, right? By these companies one, two, three. Always look at more than just one company or competition. Try to see at least three companies in your area plus in similar areas who could be getting into your area as competition. And that gives us a feeling that at least the reviewer the feeling that you have done a good market scan from the point of view of IP and business. If you get stopped because of IP, your project comes to a standstill, right? So we'd like to know that you're on your toes on this. Technical viability. As a project management capabilities, your plans of human capital, resources, either you have it or you are getting it from somewhere, like the SIIC also has some resources which are there in the incubator. They provide you a platform to be able to do a lot of things, both lab bench wise, or even for that matter, like IP and trade, scans and stuff like that. So this is something that contributes to successes of a project. And a well thought of clinical scientific investigation plan. Now, this is one area where I've seen um, a lot of people are are not sure what is the investigation pathway that they will be able to, subject their idea to be able to develop a set of data. And especially in clinical research, we don't know what is the cohort size that we should select for a particular who are the exclusion criteria for this particular study? Where do we do this study? What are the aspects of the ethics committee that are going to look at your study and decide whether it is safe enough? Where where will the ethics committee find comfort in your investigation plan and so on and so forth. So uh, the clinical investigation plan, there is an ISO standard for that, and then of course it's heavily governed, I would say, with guidelines from the ICMR and the drug controllers office. So I think you need to have uh, a good advisory as well as a consulting team to be able to ensure that your clinical research or your experimental plan is robust. Much down the line, supply chain and manufacturing risks perceived. So I'm sure most of you will not be bothered about it. Of course, we at uh, BIRAC also understand that it is a little too early to really, sort of look at these aspects for you to be able to start putting a very well mitigated plan. But I would say that preempting a thought in this area gives us an impression that of your preparedness. And what happens is that a lot of big programs uh, were dependent upon suppliers from China to provide the spare parts and microcontrollers and so on and so forth. So this turned out to be a little problematic when we were somewhere half down the project that they couldn't even get the components to manufacture. And those people who started manufacturing had to quickly redo their act to be able to, sort of look for alternative suppliers. And then, of course, there was a little element of chaos that came in there. So uh, good to keep your eyes open about it, and good to tell us that you're keeping your eyes open about it. So, in the business perspective, we try to look at your entrepreneurial facet of your team. And obviously, I mean, uh, entrepreneurs want, um, you know, a great strategy that they can build a market, and we'd like to see whether your vision is basically for a small national market, because most medical devices, when you consider a national market, is really small compared to what the global market is, or you have a eye on the global markets. And if that is the case, then your efforts into building a global product become much more defined. And then the timing of the important events in your project, which means a kind of a project chart, which talks about when you'll do your proof of concept, when you'll do each of these activities before you're able to enter into the market with your alpha product, beta product, or maybe on a scaling up process. So um, this is project management concept, which of course is time is important, and so therefore opportunity lost is a part of your business lost. So um, how fast can you get it out into the market? We expect you to have good control over that. The business also can be kind of indicated by a summarization of your overall business plan over the next, say, I'm saying 5 years, but even 3 years is good enough after you've got into the market to give us an idea of where your business is going to grow. The business will not grow linearly. I don't know how many of you will put uh, x is equal to my kind of a chart up there, but we use different forms of methods by which we can look at um, how a product is absorbed into the market or adopted into market. And uh, I've used Bass's diffusion um, method by which I look at the coefficients of P and Q, defining some of the kind of technologies that we develop, because they are mainly a lot of innovative technologies. So people are not very familiar with it. The consumers are not very familiar with it. So they need to be able to have that time of diffusing of the technologies into their purchase patterns. And then, of course, you need to look at sustaining your barriers to entry, which means that you need to be able to try to ensure that you remain, unique in some way. You can maintain the differentiation. You build new IP as you go along, and then, of course, the plans for sustainability, which is how you build a product roadmap, or how you build cost leadership and an applications pipeline, so that your base of technology can find many other applications in other areas. So that's um, it's a good idea to put all this in just one uh, or two paragraphs. The number of words that you can use is limited. So, yep. So I've covered all these points, and of course, there have been many questions that have come out of here. Many, only three, I
Three
guess.
questions, yeah.
um, have I been so clear that there are no questions, or probably you would like to? Um, would you like me to keep these slides on while we look at some of the questions, because they could be uh, not so connected with your very specific questions. Anonymous attendee,
Hmm.
uh, what are the documents required for ethical approval in India for medical electronics certification? Okay, so you're talking about the CDSCO certification for a product, so that you can use it either in clinical trials or for free to market, right? So what documents are required? If you go to the website, CDSCO website, um, you will find various criteria for which you will obtain these certifications. The first thing, of course, is if you're developing a product, you will be proposing to do a clinical study. Now, the clinical study obviously requires you to ensure that whatever product you are using is free of risks. And that is why 14971 risk management is an important input into your total safety documentation, so that the the CDSCO will permit me to touch a patient with this, right? And there has to be a clear indication that this product is safe enough to be used, so as to not cause um, severe injuries or death, right? So that is the first thing that you require. When you go into the market, the second part of the evaluation and the approval of the CDSCO is in the efficacy of the product. Now you claim that I am 20% better than Band-Aid in terms of wound healing, right? Have you been able to prove that? Can you prove that through a documentation which is credible enough and refer enough, in terms of saying that um, I have done the research and this is my research documentation, and we have proved the point, and we can also continue to prove it in the field if there is a case there. So these are the two aspects that is there. There is a standard, as I mentioned, where you develop your clinical investigation plan to prove your point, and that particular clinical investigation plan is something that you will draft specifically for your product and specifically for your claims of what the product will do in terms of the benefits it's going to accrue. How do you obtain it? Apply it on the CDSCO website. Once you have all the supporting documentations of safety, maybe a couple of tests from the test labs, notified test labs. So normally there would be a set of safety tests, like for example, an IEC 60601-1, which is mandatory for all non-invasive products, but at the same time needs to perform that level of safety. So that if I connect it to a patient, like an ECG machine, it doesn't shock him, right? Otherwise, that is called a defibrillator. Just kidding. Uh, the uh, the other question here: an entrepreneur who has just got inducted into the Gold Niti Prayas program, is he eligible to apply for big program, or is there a conflict? Ah, uh, I'm not too sure about the answer for this, about the conflict part of it, but anybody is eligible to apply for the
Yeah,
big program.
I can take that up. I can take that question up.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
sure. Uh,
So,
hmm.
yeah,
Go ahead. Yeah.
you're certainly eligible to apply for BIG, and you don't even have to change your, your center. So, the as far as the Prayas Center is a recognized incubator, you can incubate your BIG related work in the same incubation center. But in order to channelize your BIG proposal, you will have to select one of the 8 BIG partners that are being chosen by BIRAC. So you can go to BIRAC website and check out all those 8 BIG partners. SIIC is one of those 8 BIG partners. But it is mandatory to channelize your application through either of these 8 partners. Coming to the conflict part of the proposal, as long as the underlying objectives are different uh, in the Nidhi Prayas proposal and the BIG proposal, there shouldn't be any conflict. Because let's say if in Nidhi Prayas you have proposed that I want to develop a catheter, so for under Nidhi Prayas, you might be studying the material properties, character. You might be doing the characterization studies related to the particular material. But in BIG proposal, you can actually propose to develop a prototype and do the validation, some validation studies. So the overall object would be the same to develop the catheter, but the underlying activities need to be differentiated between the Prayas proposal and the BIG proposal. I hope it
Yeah.
answers that question. Hmm.
Yeah, so I would say that Nidhi Prayas was to inculcate this whole concept of being an innovator, um, and with with an intent of sort of commercializing some of your work that is there.
Right.
Because if you look at the history, um, we have always had science closeted away as an independent activity where the end result was a thesis or a paper or some documentation, but never really impacted society in short. So while the libraries and the storage rooms for these papers became bigger and bigger and bigger, I think there was a a process saying that, hey, there's so much of intellectual power, just bursting out of these various libraries and places. Um, why don't we encourage at least the inventors or the research scientists to start thinking like, okay, what do you think about taking it to the next level, which is impacting society? So I think the big program, as well as the Niti Prayas program, do have that objective in mind, is to commercialize or provide social impact on it. And the seed is planted in Nidhi Prayas. And the big program, of course, takes you to the next level of becoming big time entrepreneurs in some way or the other. So, um, yeah, sure, why not? And of course, some other questions have come in between. How elaborate and focused should a proposal be in terms of technology? See, your backup document needs to be as descriptive as many times when we read the limited word space that you have there. We need to go back to your uploaded document and try to get a more detailed idea of what exactly is the mechanism by which you're working on, because um, we've been in the market for many decades, and I would say that there are aspects which work and aspects um, which don't work, and of course they change with time. right? Today we have those microcontrollers which we just didn't believe uh, would exist even 20 years or 30 years ago, right? So things have been enabled with that, and I'm sure this detailed application that you upload throws a lot of light on the thinking that you have and how you plan to go about doing it and how the objectives can be met. So um, you have a word limit in the main application form, but try to put it in more elaborate form at your upload. Some people have just given one small diagram. One person has probably given a photograph of the product, but that's an opportunity for you to be able to clarify some of the questions that come up into the reviewer's head when he's looking at your proposal, right? So utilize that to sort of segue into your proposal details and provide it as a summary. Um, might have a couple of hypotheses on how to solve the pain points of the problem being proposed. Sure, yeah. Experimentation needs to be done to which proposal works. Why not? Yes, of course it does. Maybe one, maybe two, maybe four different approaches would be there. And that is where your design of experiment comes in. Like I've been working on personally, we have been looking at growing titanium dioxide nanoparticles on a film, on a substrate that could be either metal or titanium. And I have 6 different ways in which I can do that. Um, the question is like, which is the easiest way to produce it, and which is the easiest way and the cheapest way to produce it, so that and the fastest way to produce it, so that when in my scale up program, I'm not stuck with a process that takes me 10 days to make one sheet of film. So uh, we have a lot of projects that come in which says that these are the 3 or 4 alternative methods. Like I'm going to kill coronavirus using UV light. I'm going to kill coronavirus using UV light from LEDs and from UV lamps. Um, each of them have their own advantages. Each of them have their disadvantages. But I will evaluate both and then take it onto my product, right? So one of my products is going onto aeroplanes and spacecrafts. There is high G there. Will some of these things survive under high G? No. But in a consumer industry where we are on terra firma, it will be good enough. So I can have, in fact, 2 versions of the product using 2 different technologies, but the same concept, right? In this kind of freedom allowed in the by the big program. Big program is very big in heart. Uh, they allow anything as long as you are being scientific about it and you're being pragmatic about it. And in case you want to make big business about it, big is very acceptable to that idea. So whether it is mandatory to patent our idea before applying for big? Good question. I would always say yes. Uh, but patenting, at least a patent application that is applied for, is fairly expensive for a lot of individuals. If you look at it, fairly expensive in the sense it easily takes around 30 to 40,000 bucks out of your pocket. So, um, but it's a very good idea to apply it for big, though big is sworn to confidentiality. Your idea will not go to anybody else in the field, but uh, it also tells us that when you file, you file for a application, um, you have done your homework in terms of, um, I would say, the background search, the patent landscape, and also to a certain extent what we call as um, freedom to operate. It's a good idea to have it at that time because patent filings are happening left, right, and center. It's happening every second that we are talking. So uh, you put your foot in, maybe you'll be, having an idea that you have at least that foot in the door. Whether you'll get your patent or not, that really depends upon you and your process out there. But uh, once you put your idea in, of course, all other ideas that are coming in subsequently of the same kind of genre will probably be out. Did I answer your question, Soumya? Uh,
So there was Abhinav raised his hand. So maybe I'll allow him to raise his
where
question.
do I see raises, hand raises? Where?
In the participant this thing.
Okay,
So,
right.
mm. Okay, Abhinav, you can unmute yourself now and you can ask your question.
Yeah,
That'll be
Aditya, can you hear
nice.
me?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, thank you, sir. So, sir, I asked the last question on
Yeah.
if we have like multiple hypotheses on how to like go about solving the problem and develop the prototype and all. So the thing is like we are in like we are currently incubated in SIIC IIT Kanpur, and
Hmm.
we are like working to develop a product like for specifically for newborns like neonatology and all. So the thing is
Hmm.
that product like that technology sort of exists like sort of similar product exists, but the thing is it doesn't work well for India, and apart from this it has a very high cost because it is being manufactured like completely in like USA or Europe or China, let's say. So
Okay.
the thing is, we want to focus on both these pain points, like reducing the cost as well as improving its accuracy. So the thing is, for improving the accuracy aspect, we have some like some hypotheses in mind. Like we can change these things. We can probably do these kind of
Hmm.
things to make it
Hmm.
more accurate and all. So these are the things. So this is the stage where we are at right now. So
Hmm.
I just want to know like if we are applying for big, so in the proposal, like do we mention all these kind of hypotheses, and does it still make us like uh, strong enough to be a like to have an
So,
impression, because
yeah.
we
So
have
when
not
you
experimented with
hmm, hmm,
things as of
hmm.
now, but we are set to do it. So
Right. So, what happens is if it's a technology which is like, for example, if I take a patient monitoring system, right? A lot of companies have started developing patient monitoring systems because, new electronic components and new devices are coming and the price of these components are crashing every day.
yes, sir.
And the idea is that, of course, all the components will be, sourced and put together, and we will be able to do a little cost control. And this cost is a very strange, animal.
Mm.
Um, when you talk about price, you should be aware of the fact that the price and the costs are not related. It's not a straightforward, simple algorithm that relates the two things. And
Yes.
Aditi did mention, like, how do I price my product in the market? Well, if you're the only guy around with a technology that like super duper, you can like Apple take, you know, an arm and a leg, right? So, and the whole idea is that even in drugs and things like, for example, I don't know, you were not probably aware of that time when a hepatitis B vaccine was like 1,200 rupees a dose, right?
Mm.
And today, hepatitis B vaccine is under 100 rupees a dose, or maybe in 120 rupees a dose, right? So that's a 10-factor reduction in that. But if you look at it, the cost of producing that same dose of hepatitis vaccine was the same at that time at 1,000 rupees and is the same even at the 100 rupees stage, right? So the idea is that when people came in with their own recombinant strains, there was the earlier ones were dependent upon, say, lactobacillus recombinant. The next ones came in with some fungal specimens of Pichia and the other things. Now, when all these competing products came in, there was not much difference in the price to build that hepatitis B vaccine. Or the fermenters were the same, the capital investment was the same, the cost of growing the bug also was the same. The cost of purification and standardization is the same. But it's just that the competition brought the product down from around 1,200 to less than 100 rupees, right? Still, there is scope for coming down because the cost of manufacturing one dose of hepatitis B vaccine is in the range of tens of rupees, right? So the whole idea here is that when you go with the price of products that are there in the market, don't get fooled by the fact that these guys have to make it only at that price. Tomorrow they'll come at half the price. And that's what the Chinese did to a lot of these guys, is that they were able to scale up and produce the product at half the price. And, you know, a lot of companies went out of business for that. So don't look at price as your competing area. Look at the cost, look at the price, and see what are the margins that are being reached out there. Your company needs a profit to be able to survive. And so, therefore, you need to do that. And God forbid, tomorrow, a patient or a group of patients, there's a class action suit against you for your product not performing, right? You could be weighed down with an insurance or an action suit that claims close to about, say, 20 million or $30 million. What happens to your company, right? So that factor is always built into prices of medical products. And that's the reason why you find some of the invasive products, they are highly priced. Like, why does a pacemaker have to cost so much when, you know, the bill of material should be less than 1,000 rupees? Why should it cost like 1.5 lakhs? Well, there's an insurance component built in, you know. So all that stuff is there.
Okay.
Um,
Sure,
it's
sir.
a big subject, but your ability to be able to understand it is important, right?
Okay. So these all
Um,
things need to be, if they are mentioned elaborately in the document, that will be nice. Like that is what you expect from us, right?
I expect from you to be aware that these are the various aspects of it, at least in its qualitative, if not quantitative aspects.
Okay.
You get my point, right?
Yes, sir. Yes,
At
sir.
least that you're aware that somebody is going to screw you for $80 million if in case you go far. Now, where are you going to come up with that?
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
All right. Yeah. Because this, whatever money that you have got, is not only going to be your money, but it's going to be a lot of investors' money also, right? So,
Yes, sir.
um, so that reminds me that when you're doing your clinical studies for proving your product, that is the first question, ethical approval, committee approval. Now, ethical committee approval is also obtained contingent to the fact that you are going to insure all your cohort, right? And Indian insurance companies have no clue what is the premium they can charge you to insure their cohort. And my study involved the study of pregnant women. And finally, when the insurance policy came in, they said that pregnant women were excluded from the policy. And I said, like, guys, what was the purpose of me giving you a lecture plus also, 20 pages of documentation,
Document. Yeah.
the investigation plan, My subjects are pregnant women. So, neonatal guys, just watch out, there are exclusion criteria. So then, how do you demonstrate technical viability, particularly resources and capacity building ability if you are still in the idea stage? Of course, you can. If you are clear about your process down the line, you have a clear plan, right? That is something that we'd like to see, right? It's not that um, I'm going to, you know, do something and that is what we want you. The whole objective here is translational research. Translational research is how you translate what is in your idea as a concept to something that works on the table as a bench prototype or a proof of concept, right? Which you can subject to experimental conditions. This is what we want to see. So the technical viability is something that we would like to see whether you are having the internal capability of doing that. If not, at least get some advisor, mentor, scientist to be able to say that this is the pathway you should take, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and this is what is possible. And from that, we can actually see what is the risk that we are taking. See, this is a risk area where we can say that at some point, and I know a couple of direct projects we were mentoring, that they've reached a point and said that we assume that the sensor is going to have this kind of ability to do the measurement, but it didn't. So let's close the program as a failure, right? We are quite open to the fact that programs will fail because the concepts did not work out, right? But the fact is that when you looked at this particular team, they looked at it and said, no, no, you still have a, a minor, uh, I would say, misunderstanding about this particular sensor. Um, we, we can use the same technology and maybe move forward. And maybe if you do a little bit of changes here and there, and I'm trying to avoid being very specific about the project. uh, you know omata is one of the things that they ask us to swear by confidentiality. So uh, and this team who had almost given up hope and said let's disband and get back to doing whatever we were doing, like what jobs we were holding. um, they they kind of said, yes, there is this glimmer of hope that we can still kind of work on. They worked on it. And I think that product is coming out and shaping out as a final product very soon. So that is the kind of stuff that you can get in technical viability and visibility, is get support from your scientist friends or your colleagues or people. And then of course SIIC uh, is there to look at you and say that, well, I mean, this is what possibly is your viability. So if in case they had looked at your product and then they'd seen certain developments, they would have said, yeah, this is going to work. The science is robust enough to be able to work, or you can make the science work. That's what you have to express in that, right? And that's what we also see in a product. Like you know to a certain extent, we are not great experts in the particular field, but we can understand if the science works. If you're trying to make um, a special carbon molecule that has a different structure altogether, whatever it is, and we can say, yeah, this has technical viability from the chemistry point, right? Um, can we do launch into the market with limited clinical study and continue with extensive clinical trials while the product is already launched into the market? Well, you can launch into the market any product that passes basic elements of safety. And there is an international understanding between various countries that say that uh, we are at this moment not very concerned about the efficacy of your product, but if it is, say, an ECG machine, now that machine has been, manufactured by every Tom, Dick, and Harry. In Bangalore, at least, there are uh, close to about 120 different companies doing ECG machines. Uh, but the fact is that uh, it shouldn't kill anybody. So you need to be able to clear the safety aspects of the ECG machine before you can show it to a customer. So the international community has got a method, what we call as a CB certification, CB, not CE, but CB certification, which clears a product for safety and use. But if you are trying to claim a certain advantage over other machines, if you say mera machine to barabar hai sabka, right, and it is safe, that can be put into the market. But if you're trying to claim saying that my machine does much more than what the other machines do, you will have to do your clinical study to prove that, right? You need evidence. And if you need to build evidence, you have to conduct the trials or the pilots or whatever it is. So, and that needs to be published. So it may be good for you to launch it, but you will not be able to claim anything until you have evidence with you. Otherwise, nobody will take you seriously, right? So that is basically what the CE mark is all about, or what the regulatory clearance is all about. It also looks into people who are claiming things just for the heck of claiming things, right? I can claim like a magic wizard that my whatever magic wand will cure you of cancer, almost immediately. Now, how do I control such kind of folks, who come up with such claims? So that's the regulatory clearance part. Did I answer your question with that, Sriram? Uh, right. It was very insightful. There were major reasons. Some of the grantees couldn't finish the projects. In past, how many of the projects crossed marketing hurdles to reach consumers? Oh, it's like a pipeline, Himanshu. The pipeline is that you start with 100 and only three fellows go to the finish line, right? So the number of dropouts are many. And the thing is that basically uh, many of the projects which are an early stage of things fall into problems because of the fact that they continue to pursue something which the market did not consider as important to them, right? So there is a kind of expectations management gap that happened in between. And I would say that's the reason why we take so much of trouble and pain in the first stage itself to be able to, for you to be able to assess and get deep consumer insights and domain insights also. Because uh, your your product was superior till yesterday, but today somebody else came out with a new idea that that can completely demolishes your idea, right? So you're gone. But to be frank, of course, a lot of people manage to hit the finishing line. I mean, from the big perspective, in terms of POC, that is the big outcome is the proof of concept. A lot of people reach that finishing line. There are very few who kind of drop out as not successful. But from the finishing line to a consumer for a product that is there on a large scale market, um, I think it is probably 1 in 30 to 1 in 40 that actually is managing to get there to be able to become a product that is earning revenue enough to feed its inventors or the promoters, right? The rest of them are still, uh, trying to give it away free and getting, uh, some revenue from it. I mean, giving it away free and trying to establish the adoption. So yeah, we are still early stage, but the one, two, or three fellows who have really made it big are kind of the role models for the rest of us, right? Uh, Even we are down in the dumps, so don't give up. Maybe your project is too early for the market. Maybe your idea is too early for the market. It's happened to me also many times. Lost money, but just patience, and then you see the project. You see the idea being picked up. Medical products absorption, the P and Q factors are extremely slow, right? So don't expect your hockey stick to happen in 3 years' time. No way. So anonymous attendee, for an unlisted medical device that uses UV mechanism, can you please explain a bit on the safety guidelines and relaxatory critical times like these? Well, I mean, as I said, your risk analysis is very important. UV exposure depends upon what type of UV, UVA, UVB, UVC, right? UVB and UVA, we are exposed every day in the sun anyways, right? UVC is a slightly more aggressive form of radiation that if you get a dose that is more than what you can actually tolerate or your body cells can tolerate, you will get burnt. You will get seriously burnt. And the thing is, like, you have to consider all those safety things. When UV light is switched on, it produces ozone. Ozone is in some way okay in small quantities, but beyond a certain level, ozone is a complete no-no for our lungs, right? It destroys our lungs. So these are the safety guidelines, and there are standards on what is the amount of these emitted gases or reactive oxygen species that we are allowed, whether it's peroxide ions or whether it's ozone that you're permitted into the air. And if this is not controlled, then this device will not get approved, right? So try to look at technologies that can that can be contained. The UV should not be exposed. It should be kept in a, in an enclosed area, and material around it should not begin to crumble with UV light. A lot of plastics are not treated for intense UV radiation. So I guess I've had a little run in with some of the UV machines. So if you are interested, we could share some insights that I have learned on it. Yeah, the UV mechanism is for infection, disinfection. I don't know that. Um, do you want to die of COVID, or do you want to die of being roasted by UV radiation? That is the question mark, right? Um, Kindly elaborate on risk score you mentioned. Right. Shika, this is 40971. You have a chart there, which is called the risk management chart, where you list out all the possible risks that you can imagine. Now, how do you list this risk that you can imagine? What I do is I look at the user groups. Like, for example, if it is a medical product, the user may be a nurse or maybe a doctor, or uh, and then the peripheral user groups like biomedical engineers who are working in the hospital to keep the machines running. I call them for, focal group discussions and create scenarios, and then I keep getting the other risks from their experiences that they have faced actually in the ward or in the hospital. And based on that, I make all these risks down. I also have two columns. One is a column of a score of 1 to 5, which says 1 is safe, 5 is death, causing death, right? 4 causing grievous injury, 3 grievous injury for life, 3 causing injury but can be cured. And that is the grading I use for one side of the risk that is there. And then multiplied by another column, which says uh, the number of instances, say, per month that this kind of risk is noticed in the hospital. This, the nurse tells me that this happens maybe 5 times, 6 times a week, or 5 times, 6 times a month. It happens, right? And these risks are related to the fact that uh, they are the ones which cause what we call as uh, preventable medical errors, like suddenly oxygen stopping in a hospital, right? This is a risk that is there in a ventilator, right? And when you say that, how could oxygen stop? Well, it stopped in all India Institute of Medical Sciences. 8 people died as a result of that. So forget it. I mean, like, it happens everywhere, right? And we have guys, I mean, our mentality, the mentality of the people is that we don't perceive these risks so that we can prevent them. So we only react whenever it happens, right? So the thing is that this risk management chart actually is an exercise where you perceive these risks, whether it's something that falls on the leg of the doctor. It contains a bulb that has mercury in it. The mercury has spilt on the floor like a blood pressure apparatus, right? Is that a risk? Yes, it is a risk. It's a big, big risk that mercury shouldn't be lying around in that condition, control condition. So therefore, that chart is something that you will see very commonly in the initial stages of product development. And I think you will find it, a lot of it, on the internet too. But I use it all the time. I use it all the time whenever I'm trying to evaluate a new concept, right? So that is there. And then I hope that answers your question, or maybe, if you'd like to write and uh, get a deeper insight in that, but you'll find it in Google. I mean, risk management, ISO 14971, that 14971, right? If you look under ISO 14971, you will find most of the risk management and how to risk score. So you multiply those two things, then you apply technology and science to mitigate that. You put whatever it is, then there will be a residual risk that is left behind. So from a risk score of, say, 25, you brought it down to, say, around 7 by risk mitigation. Then that's 7. you can put onto a label and stick it on the machine and say, this is a risk here, guys, watch out. So that is labeling instructions. That's a part of your C mark also. You need to show the labeling. Um, in case a similar medical device exists, would it qualify for big application if we are? Of course it does. We are not saying that you have to be inventors 100%. We are talking of Abhinav Atma Nirbhar Bharat, right? And 80% of the equipment being imported from outside the country. Uh, sure, I mean, be a good reverse engineer if you want to, right? But add your 2 cents, like the Chinese did, of course, in the last decade. Add your 2 cents to that technology and become a world leader. Mindtree did that. You know, China today they have taken over all the patient monitoring markets in the whole of Europe because they did a much better job on that, right? So if you have one situation like that, I would say commercially, yes, why not? But add your 2 cents if you can, because big loves to have people with deep science knowledge, right? So if you're able to demonstrate that, awesome. Sir, for a formulation which has cleared preclinical studies, do we need IC clearance for application to the grant? No, you don't. You don't. If you have cleared preclinical studies, do we need even to do, sort of studies? If you want to do studies on human patients, yes, because you would not be allowed to touch a patient till the time you have an IEC clearance. But if you're just doing, in silico or in vivo studies for your proof of concept, you don't need IEC clearance for that. I hope that came through okay. Um, Rama Lemeria, I'm working on a technology that is part of a non-provisional patent applied by my former university. I'm one of the uh, part of a non-provisional patent. What is that kind of a patent? I know
Let
provisional
me.
patents. Yeah, yeah.
Uh,
Aditi, you're on mute.
yeah. Even I have no clue. Maybe let me unmute Rama
Hmm.
and ask him. Rama. Okay. Hi, Rama. You can unmute
Yeah,
yourself and yes.
yeah.
Good.
Thank you. So this was a patent that was applied in the U.S. So we had applied for a provisional patent for the first 12 months, and then once the 12 months expires, then we get to apply for a non-provisional. So the provisional just ensures that we
You have a
get
foot in
first
the
right,
door.
and
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And then the non-provisional is the regular patent application that goes through to review and everything else.
Okay, this is the
Yeah.
pre-patent, that is post-provisional patent to the stage of patent examination, that is the non-provisional side, right? Yeah. So,
Yes, yes,
so this will be the more detailed work that you have done to be able to prove that the patent is actually a live uh, subject.
right.
I'm one of the inventors. We still have to be awarded the patent and negotiate licensing with the university, right? And this
Yes, with the
university
universities.
and the university is a US university.
Yes,
So you will be governed under the Bayh-Dole Act, right, in the
right.
university. The Bayh-Dole
Yeah.
Act will give the first right of refusal for commercializing the patent to the inventors, right?
Yes,
If in
yes.
case you do not you say that you don't want to commercialize it, they will be free to give it to anybody else. So uh,
Mhm.
so you have to talk to them, sign an agreement, and give them some assurances that you'll give them money. Depends really on which university you're in, but I know that the upfront payment could be anywhere between 10 to about $20,000, and
Yes.
and then there would be uh, a royalty terms that will come in once you commercialize, and the royalty terms will really vary from university to university and the type of
Yeah.
license that you're looking at.
Yeah, but I was just wondering how would I present this in the BIG proposal, because we've not started negotiating with the university yet.
Well, if you haven't started negotiating the university, what is the guarantee that they haven't given the license to somebody else?
They've not given it because
They won't
the
until they get
patent
an
has not
NOC
been
from
awarded yet.
you.
Hmm.
Yeah, because you have the
Yeah.
first right of refusal. So if you if you have not given an no, I mean no objection certificate or refusal, right?
Mhm.
Uh, that continues to remain there, but there is a certain period of time by which you have to confirm that you are ready to pick up the
Yes.
license. If in case you don't confirm, then it becomes open to the public. You assume that you have no interest in it.
Yeah.
Because any kind of patent needs to be also kept alive as a part of the maintenance, right? Otherwise it lapses if you
Yes.
don't pay up the maintenance. So if it lapses, then it becomes open to exploitation. So that's what the university keeps right. So you can mention there saying that I'm in the process of negotiating
Okay.
for this. And I also need the money to negotiate, because you can't just go to the negotiating table without money in your pocket. They're going to ask for an upfront fee, right? And you'll have to give a
Right.
commitment saying, yes, I'll pay the upfront fee sometime, some sometime within this period or something of that sort. Then you are committed to that. No? It's a purchase order. It's an
Okay.
agreement. Yeah.
Got it. Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Yep. Thank you.
Uh,
Thank you so much, sir.
no problem, sir. Uh, how we can get FDA 510K class 2 medical device certification in India? Uh, you have people who will, sort of handle this kind of a thing. The
Hmm.
consultants who will handle this kind of documentation and stuff like that. But certification will be issued by US FDA in the US, right? So uh, you will have that there. I mean, it's a standardized process where you can apply for it and stuff like that. But you will still need to have a representative in the US who will be able to sort of pursue this for you. So yeah, it's time consuming and definitely not so straightforward. But 510K is, they say it's 6 months, 180 days, but because of shortage of staff, and then of course the standard COVID, uh, reasons, they will say that we'll reduce the barrier for the emergency use authorization if you say that it's used in COVID,
Cool.
and maybe give you a temporary clearance for some time. But 510K is, I assume you will be having intentions of getting into the US market, right? So if you do intend to get into the US market, you would probably be having, connects out there who would be working on this. And yeah, I guess uh, emergency use authorization does not necessarily mean that you get a regulatory clearance forever and ever. But once the pandemic is over, which uh, which of course everybody expects to happen once the vaccination is drive happens. Um, but there's no stopping a COVID 20 or a 21 coming in. So um, I'm sure you guys can find your way through that. But get any if you're eligible, get a emergency use. It's much faster. You get it in a month and a half. Say it's a ventilator or something like that, you probably get it very quickly.
Hmm.
Sir, jaggery is good for health. I agree with you completely. Instead of sugar, just we want to improve the quality of existing conventional jaggery plant setup. the jaggery quality. A good quality of jaggery might a complete minerals rich sweetener, might be it will be considered in BIRAG for trail and funding, or other better organizations will help in this manner. Deepak, I'm not sure. I mean, what you exactly want, but um, you know, the basic thing about jaggery is it's unpurified sugar, which straight out of um, uh, the ganna, as they would call it, right? So when you crush ganna and then make it into jaggery, at least I know those jaggery, sort of units in uh, Mysore, we have a lot of jaggery producing units. They add a lot of chemicals for, uh, I can't tell what chemicals, but they add a lot of chemicals into the cauldron where they're making the jaggery and boiling it. And then, of course, while ganna is also another uh, source of a lot of other kind of chemicals like pesticides, which are not clearly washed off before they are converted into juice. There's pesticide content in it, and there's a lot of other things content in it. So I don't think that we have any regulation in terms of the food quality that comes in. FSAI may have it, but I'm not aware of. My competency is not in understanding much of these areas of jaggery, but I can tell you that the jaggery tastes different from different places. And of course, the diversity of tastes is good in some way, but I'm not too sure about the safety of these kind of jaggeries because of the pesticide. And I found pieces of sand and stuff like that in some of the jaggeries. So um, I'm not sure under what manufacturing conditions, whether it's GMP or a good manufacturing practice is produced there, or it is done in open cauldrons where when a car passes by, it kicks all the sand into the jaggery cauldron and whatnot. So um, there's a lot of work stuff you can do. Um, and by the way, uh, it's pronounced trial and not trail. Trail has a different meaning. Trial has a different meaning, Deepak. So I thought
Yes, sir.
I'll probably alert you to that because I see that happening all the time. You know, people say I want to do a trail on this. So we use the word trail for an audit trail. That means we trail either the scientific concept through an audit process, or we trail the accounting process also to find out if there's any error somewhere.
Sorry.
Um,
Yes, sir.
no
Sorry.
worries,
Sorry.
no worries.
It's
No,
it's trial.
I,
It's trial only.
yeah,
It's
yeah, no,
trial.
no. I just wanted to alert you on that because I see this
No
so
issue.
often repeated again and again, and they kind of give you two different meanings. No?
No, yes, yes,
Um,
yes. Exactly.
so, so yeah, I look forward to some great stuff, good jaggery from you. The only thing is that develop a method by which you could, sort of
Yes,
guarantee the
yes, sir. Yes,
quality of jaggery that comes out from its various thing. And if you have a process that is super duper, doesn't require all those I don't know, ammonium nitrate or something they add. I'm not sure what.
no. So sodium hypo is there.
Yeah, yeah,
That was added by the conventional jaggery plants. But
yeah,
sorry, sir. Actually, I have developed a. You are correctly saying that GMP is not followed in the
yeah,
conventional jaggery plant, and that is open pan
yeah,
boiling is there, and some shed is not there, unhygienic conditions is there. It is agreed. It is agreed with you. But I have taken a patent on the
yeah,
jaggery plant
yeah.
itself to improve the technology one by one. One is the
Yeah, so
concentration, is the closed concentration is there, totally closed plant is there, no human intervention, no more human intervention is there, and more. I have taken a patent on concentration, and my patent on clarification is also there. For complete
hmm,
plant, complete jaggery plant, I have to convert it into the modernized jaggery plant. So just is the
hmm,
aim is there. So firstly we are introduced the GMP good manufacturing practices in the jaggery plants. then we may able to make a good product from the jaggery plants. And rightly you are
Sure.
saying that cane is having a lot of mineral, a lot of elements itself. So just we are in our manufacturing practices, we are reduced and we are certain the elements which is coming out come out with the sugar cane and going into the jaggery. So we are reduce this one, and we are also make the jaggery standardize what wherever it will be made by the plant and whatever the condition is there. So that will not
Sure.
affect the quality of the jaggery.
I'm
Perfect. So, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
no, 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 that's all right. I just wanted to let Deepak know that this session we purposely focusing only on the medtech related
Yes, 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 yes,
innovation
yes, yes.
paper.
Sorry,
Yeah,
Aditi.
yeah.
Actually, just
No, in
And
fact,
next, no,
yeah,
that's all right.
but sir having the
yeah.
good knowledge
That's okay.
and he is sharing the things that is correct also.
No, see what
Yeah,
happens,
yeah,
Deepak.
certain.
I think the healthcare part of it is important in all our foods
Yes, yes,
because that's a primary source of where we get our nutrition. And when you said the word complete minerals, there are things called micronutrients, which are basically heavy metals, which should be in micro quantities, right? And
right.
because of the water and other kind of environmental pollution, some of these heavy metals have gone up in volume. And in fact, if I take some samples of jaggery from various places and try to analyze them, say on an ICP on atomic absorption, I will find that some of these heavy metals will be totally out of the acceptable limits. So keep that in mind also, right?
Yes,
That
right.
you have to do analytical tests on your batches to ensure that these minerals remain in the micronutrient levels and not in the macronutrient levels, right?
Yes,
You don't
right.
need the minerals. The moment they become macronutrients, you will end up with things like autism and liver damage and stuff like that.
Right, sir. Right.
What is the emphasis on the clinical efficacy of the device proposed for big grant? Of course, if it is not efficacious, there is no reason for you to be there. It's a reason the atre for your existence, right? I mean, Nikunj, tell me something. I mean, you want to develop something, you have to be uh, saying that I have developed this with this particular benefit that is going to have over my competition, and so therefore I have the reason and right to be existent. Otherwise, I can clone something and say that, well, I'm just addressing scaling up issues, right? Um, I will contribute to the total number of manufacturable units. So, um, you know, I would say even if you're selling a mosquito swatter um, or one of those mosquito tennis bats, which you kind of kill mosquitoes by just waving around, right? Even if you're developing that, you have to be able to say that mine does a better job than the other guy. And when I do that, when I try to claim that, I have to prove it in some way. So I have to design an experiment which says that it's a convincing proof that it is better than that. Um, I'm talking about
Right, sir.
mosquito
So
swatting, but
my
I'm sure you
my
must have had the arguments between Covaxin and the other vaccine, which is better and which is not so better. Though may not be uh, on us, but if you look at all the uh, arguments, it's based on clinical efficacy.
yeah, my question is, do we
Yeah.
need to have some preliminary evidence already when we apply for the big grant, or can that clinical efficacy be part of the big application?
So, the thing is that the clinical efficacy you will claim to have, right? There's one application that I received which says that insulin stability is controlled by a certain set of chemicals which are not really safe, right? I'm going to use another set of chemicals, not defined, not cleared, which has the only thing it has is it's It is US FDA approved chemical. Now, US FDA approves chemicals for different purposes, right? Not necessarily clinical. FDA is Food and Drug Administration, so food also, right? Now, if you're going to use it in a vaccine, it doesn't necessarily mean that the intended application or the application is going to be drugs. Now, I'm in a total doubt that what are you going to use, right? And how will I estimate whether you are going to use something that is safe enough, or at least competingly wise safe enough for that to be done? And then the only way you can prove that is that you may not have done the job of that safety study, but there would be thousands of other people around the world who have done a similar sort of safety study, or at least a likely safety study, like a 510K product, right? It would have been done, and you can pull out those documentation if they have veracity, like if they're in peer-reviewed articles or something of that sort. You can pull that out and say that the clinical efficacy of this particular thing has been shown, if it is a stability or whatever it is, right? You can
Okay,
say
so
that,
we can cite to already
yeah,
existing
correct,
evidence.
yes. So that forms the basis of your concept being used in your application, right?
Okay.
So we know that from the science point of view, from the evidence point of view, there is evidence, right? Now,
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, sir. That is
all
very
right,
helpful.
yeah. Sir, say a medical device which is tested clinically and is ready to be used standalone. We just tested clinically and ready to be used standalone, but the applicant wants to develop it further to incorporate collection of quantitative data, patent, patient performance, etc. Would big grant would be a good for that? Some of the other BIRAC grant. Yeah, I think once you have uh, entered into the market, the big grant is really not the relevant application point for you. Here, there are BIPPs and the other grants,
Libre.
which SIBRI grants and all those things, which are more relevant to your post-market kind of studies, or even to a certain extent pre-market, large-scale pre-market studies. But since you said it's ready to be used as a standalone and market is tested clinically and used as a standalone, you are kind of indicating that you are trying to do a pre-market clinical study or pilot trials, right? And these kind of uh, uh, funds are available from various agencies apart from BIRAC. Like, for example, you have the Department of Health Research, you have um, other grants that come in to help you move towards doing the clinical study apart from the BIRAC-based grants. So most likely it is not a big one. I mean, not big means BIG
Yeah.
based thing, right? So if you look around, Sahil, at the uh, BIRAC site, you will find references to all those other kinds of grants there. Um, and there's a kind of description on what stage, where you can do that. Did that answer your question, Sahil?
I think it did. We don't
Yeah.
have Sahil anymore in the attendee list.
Ah,
Uh,
okay, okay.
yeah, Mitali, I think, yeah, with this we come to the end of the Q&A. Mitali has raised her hand, so I would just let her
Speak.
unmute herself. Yeah. Mitali, you can unmute yourself and ask the question. Um, okay, so Mitali says she mistakenly raised her hand.
Okay, she was fooling around with the menus, the menu screens with her. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It was for
Okay.
exercises.
Yes. All
So,
right.
mhm. Yeah, go ahead.
So,
Over to you, Aditya. Aditi.
Aditi.
Yeah.
No, I think we had a fantastic session. I mean, we covered a lot of ground here. There were like some of the queries were quite generic. We also get those questions asked by the people who are interested in BIG, but there were certain other interesting queries related to FDA, the certifications, risk assessment, etc. I hope the audience liked it, and thank you so much, sir, for sparing
You're
one and a
welcome.
half
Yeah,
hour.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
No,
it was
no problem. My next meeting is only at 8:30 in the evening, so
okay.
I'm nice and easy till then. But if you find that you can take this slide list and share it with the participants so that they
Hmm.
can use it as the checklist during application. Uh, and if the proposal comes to me for review, I will be really happy to see some of those points addressed. Makes my life a little easier. Otherwise, each proposal takes me almost, I would say, close to about an hour to search the internet for, to see whether they are clear of patents, if they are clear of IP, if their innovation is, robust enough to some extent. Like, uh, 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 I also look at similar sort of papers and patents that have been issued so that there is a clear visibility of how these guys are going to negotiate through that uh, uh, channel. And then, of course, I mean, it's interesting. You will find patents that were patented
Hmm.
and were not commercialized. And, patent is really a boj on your shoulders because it
Shoulder, right.
continues takes money. So those guys
Exactly.
don't pay the maintenance fee and then it gets expired.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
you'd like to know why it was not commercialized, right? So that means it doesn't have commercial potential or
Hmm.
what? And then the
Hmm.
question marks begin to come up. So um, yeah, but the fact is that I've had one or two instances where we built a business on one particular intellectual property, but during the journey of building the product, that patent was completely unimportant. Uh, and the patents that we developed during the journey were far more practical and robust than the
Hmm.
original patent, which was a fancy uh, blue sky kind of an idea. So,
Hmm.
um, so I guess that's also another reality. But
Yes.
do use this checklist, and I'm sure that both pitches, that is reviewers' individual comments and the when you make your PPT presentation, both these areas you will face many questions which are related to these checkpoints. Thank you, and guys, have a wonderful day, right?
You too, sir.
And feel
Th-
free to share this sheet with all the
Sure.
participants if
I'll
they'd like. Yeah,
certainly do that,
there
sir.
is there's no restriction on its use. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. Bye
Yeah,
bye. Good evening,
bye.
everyone. Bye.
Bye.